We'll begin the class on white magic. We were talking about the Temple of Ibez, IBEZ, which was established, I think he said, 17 million years ago. And at that time they had a breakaway. They had the beginning of the Dark Brotherhood. And yeah, he says, during this time, there was a rebellion that created the Black Lodge. And this led to the Great Flood. So whether that's the same flood as the one in the Bible, I don't know for sure, but quite possibly, except it was probably much earlier than biblical people think. But anyway, he says this IBEZ is 4 letters symbolizing 4 avatars that are heads of 4 globes on the Earth chain. Now, the Earth chain is, he says there's 7 different bodies for the Earth. 3 ahead of us that descended, and we're in the lowest one, the 4th. And then we have ascending globes. So there's 7 globes altogether. So altogether, we're on the 4th. So there's apparently been 4 different logos that headed up these 4 globes, and their 4 names are symbolized by IBEZ. And this this temple that they built is where the masters actually incarnated and established a teaching order for primitive man, and it's been in existence in one form or another ever since. And it says these teachings consummated in the mystery schools of Chaldea, Egypt, Greece, and other places, also the Mayans. And so they spread themselves around the world and incorporated these various teachings that have filtered down to us through antiquity. And he says during this time there was a rebellion, and that could have been the one associated with Lucifer in the Bible that talks about the fall there. It says powerful thought forms must be faced that still exist, he says, particularly in America. Well, that's interesting. It says powerful negative thought forms, particularly in America, still exist. I wonder why it would be more in America than other places. Maybe it's because the temple was built, and it was actually South America. I think it was, if I remember right, somewhere in Brazil, I think. But he says the work of these adepts and the mysteries of the Temple of Ibez are still persisting and being carried on by the masters and adepts in physical incarnation throughout the world. Now, where that is, I don't know, but maybe it's places in India or whatever where some of these teachings are still in existence. He doesn't really say. He says there are what's say?
I think he did say. I think at some point in there he says something like, then a later school was founded in the Himalayas, and that's the one that's still going today.
Yeah, he did say that that's still in existence, and that must be the one he's talking about, the one in the Himalayas. That's the only one we know for sure, and then the other masters and adepts are just kind of scattered throughout the world. Okay, they're teaching about soul contact and seeing the physical, emotional, and mental bodies as vehicles of service. The goal is to enter the spiritual kingdom where we can begin learning anew. And he says in the Atlantean times, the students were taught from the feeling nature. The heart center was the highest they went. and they had to appeal to their emotions. And now in Aryan times, he says we focus on the mind until the third initiation, where the person begins a shift to the intuition. So right now, the mind is a connecting link, the higher mind, and the higher mind links us to the intuition. So the advanced lives on the planet have developed the power of what you might call uh, pure reason and intuition, and the kind of bridging back and forth. They're leaning toward that which is logical and reasonable, yet extending their minds to capture the spiritual essence of knowledge from the intuitive level. Now, when the intuitive level is captured in what you might call the intuitive flash or the aha moments that people have, then the seeker gets kind of a package of knowledge that isn't written in script, but it's written in kind of ideas and principles that just come to him. And he may write a whole book just on one flash that of inspiration that he happened to receive. And this is kind of the ultimate where most seekers are going to wind up in this life is going. First of all, we have to overcome the emotional, center ourselves on the mind, and then go to the next level. And what's interesting is the emotional is related to female or magnetic energy, the mental to male or radiant energy, and then the intuitional again, that's female again. So we want to the highest we're going after is up to the next female level, so to speak, you could say. Okay, so he says students in their search, he says they must understand the 7 rays, their groupings, influence, and their eventual synthesis and oneness. Now, we've covered the 7 rays before, I believe, in this class. We have first of all, we have the original ray of will, power, and purpose, which is invisible and formless, and from this comes everything. That vibrates, and the wavelength produces the 3 rays, which is the ray of willpower, purpose, love, wisdom, understanding, and light is the third one. Can't remember the triplicity on that. Light, knowledge, and
active
radiance.
intelligence.
Right, that's the name of it, active intelligence, array of active intelligence. But I'm talking about the 3 sub aspects, and but so we have these 3, and then from the third one, the ray of active intelligence, it breaks off into additional 4, which is ray 4 is harmony through conflict, and the ray 5 is concrete knowledge, and 6 is idealism, and then 7th is ceremonial magic, and order and law is governed by the 7th. And the 7th is very close and kind of synthetic with the first. Now, so when creation begins, it begins as 1, turns into 3, and then the 7, and then the 7 goes back to the 3, and the 3 go back to the 1. And we go through these cycles, our universe does, again and again. Okay. So students, he says, must understand their groupings. Now, for instance, your personality is on one of the rays. Your physical body is on one of the rays. Your emotional body is on one of the rays. Your mental body is on a different ray. and your soul is on another ray, and then your monad is on one of the three rays. Your monad is on. And so the key is to take the energy of the various rays that govern you and harmonize them as a personality under your personality ray, and then harmonize the personality ray to the soul ray, and then harmonize the soul ray to the ray of your monad, which will be either ray 1, 3, 2, or 3. So you might want to focus on this. Focus on one of the three rays: willpower, purpose, love, wisdom, understanding, light, knowledge, radiance, or whatever, and think, which one of these rays do I feel most in harmony with? And this is where we want to set the end goal as to where we're going to come up with. Is it love, wisdom? A lot of people into metaphysics are on the second ray of love, wisdom, because this is called the teaching ray, and people that are instinctual teachers have either their soul or their monad will be on this ray quite often. Not always. This is an important thing to realize, is that oftentimes we think we got things figured out, and then we find out there's exceptions to everything. So, for instance, a lot of people think associate ray 4 with creativity, and it is associated with it, but DK says that creative people are on all the rays. So you can't just say that if a person's very creative, he'll be ray 4 will be dominant. So it's quite complicated, and what's a little frustrating about it is he never really told us how to discover which rays we're on. We just have to kind of get a sense of it, a sense of how your mind thinks, and look at the rays and see which ray your thinking process is on, how your emotions feel and which ray your emotions may be on, and what your life purpose seems to be, and this kind of indicates what ray your soul may be on and your personality. And as you begin in life and you look and see what interested you when, say, you were below 35 or 21 or in your younger years, and then if you made a shift in interest and had an aggressive interest in maybe a different direction, that would indicate that you were governed by your personality ray when you were young and what your personality ray may be. And then when the shift was made, it would be quite often because of some type of soul contact and getting soul direction, and then examine the difference in the interest, and this would indicate what ray your soul may be on. So look at your activity when you're young and what interested you. Was it, and then look at the meaning of the various rays and see which ray maybe dominated your personality. And then if you made a shift in interest, then that shift in interest would indicate in later life, because especially if it's a spiritual, you feel like it came from a higher communication, a higher stimulus, then that would indicate where your soul ray may be, which is kind of interesting.
I got somebody that I think a member of this group at one point sent me years ago a URL of a website that has a questionnaire that helps you figure out what all of your different rays are.
Yeah, I think somebody posted that, and it seems like I tried it out. I can't remember how accurate it was. Did anyone did you try that out, Rick?
I did it, and I've got it. I've got a text file somewhere that lists all my different rays. and there's nothing that sounds disagreeable about it, but
Yeah.
it's like, oh, well, I guess I have to, this is just some additional information to help me work on myself with.
Yeah, I figured out a formula from a astrology chart that would give some indications. I didn't guarantee it was accurate, but it would give indications.
I think some of what this site was using was astrological exact time of birth and things like that. So it seems like it works the same way as far as how it.
Yeah, we'll have to do a Google search on that. There might be 2 or 3 pretty good things out there we haven't checked, because it's been several years since I think that came up. So there might be something even better out there. We'll have to do a Google search and see if anyone's come up with anything that little test you can take to determine the race, see what ingenuity is out there on that. Okay. He says the student shifts from being dominated by the third ray to the second, where duality is still at play. Now, in the rays 2 and 3, the disciple is still has to deal with duality. And he says even with love, there's duality involved. He says it's inherent in love itself. He says there's the lover and the loved, the desirer and the desired, the seeker and the sought. And so if a person is focused on ray 3, he's in matter and there's dual nature there. And then even in ray 2, there's the love and lover and the loved. And eventually the first ray synthesizes everything into oneness. He says, we'll sum up the work the disciple accomplishes as he struggles with the masters and the energies of the mental world. He says, first of all, the disciple uses his mind. He senses duality, tries to find oneness by unifying the self and the not self, by not identifying with the form. The second thing he does is the mind, rightly used, becomes the recorder of 2 types of energies, the worlds of form and the world of souls. So the disciple is split into this dual nature where he realizes that there's something else besides the physical things he sees about him. There's a higher contact. The average guy just calls this by the generic name of God. Okay, everything out there comes from God. And but specifically, he eventually learns there's a higher nature, the higher self, and that's the dual part. He says later, the soul and its instrument become so unified that atonement or enone happens and the duality disappears. And the soul knows itself to be all that is, all that has been, and all that will be. Interesting statement. And it's kind of hard for dwelling in duality to think of yourself as all that is. But we're linked up. It's kind of funny how there's the many and the one. The one is hard to perceive while we are part of the many. But being part of the many, yet being one is a little bit like the cell in the body. The cell in the body is an entity to itself, yet it's also one with the body. Okay, any comments on that before we move ahead? He gives us an ancient chant from Atlantis, he says. And so I'll just read this because there's no way to talk about it without just reading it word for word. But here's what they chanted, and in some of these ancient chants, he said they used certain tones and certain rhythms and so on. And a lot of these have been kind of lost to anyone but the inner circle of masters as to how to make these work. So some of these ideas we will kind of explore later on. Okay, here is the wording. I stand between the heavens and the earth. I vision God. I see the forms God took. I hate them both. It's kind of a funny statement. Not do they mean to me, for one I cannot reach, and for the lower of the two I have no longer any love. Torn am I, space and its life I cannot know, and so I want it not. Time and its myriad forms I know too well. Pendant I hang betwixt the two, desiring neither. So it sounds like, this is the first part of it, but it sounds like what they're trying to put into the mind of the Atlantean student was kind of a negation of form. So he switches his attention from form to spirit. It continues, God from high heaven speaks. There is a change. I hear with ear attentive and listening turn my head. That which is visioned, yet visioning could not reach, is near to my heart. Old longings come again, yet die. Old chains with clamor snap. Forward I rush. Myriads of voices speak and halt me in my tracks. The thunder of the sounds of earth shuts out the voice of God. I turn me on my favorite path and vision once again the long-held joys of earth and flesh and kin. I lose the vision of eternal things. The voice of God dies out. Torn again am I, but only for a little time. Backward and forward shifts my little self, even as a bird soars to heaven and settles back again upon the tree. Yet God in his high place outlasts the little bird. Thus I know that God will victor be and later hold my mind and me in thrall. Hark to the joyous paean that I chant, the work is done. My ear is deaf to all the calls of earth except that small voice of all the hidden souls within the outer form, for they are as myself, with them I am at one. God's voice rings clear, and in its tones and overtones, the little voices of the little forms dim and fade out. I dwell within a world of unity. I know all souls are one. Swept am I by universal life, and as I sweep upon my onward way, the way of God, I see lesser energies die out. I am one. I, God, I am the form in which all forms are merged. I am the soul in which all souls are fused. I am the life, and in that life all little lives remain. That's quite impressive wording there. You know, if anyone claims to ever transmit the Tibetan's teachings again, I'm going to look for these like profound things from the old commentary or ancient dialogues it brings up, because I haven't seen anyone else produce such profound wording as DK is able to bring. That was beautiful wording. But
I found one DK not too long ago. Might be him again. It had sites with these new quotes from him, and the one I saw was he announces, "Forget all my old teachings on right and wrong and duality. There is only oneness now," or something like that. So he's back.
Yeah, I've been investigating DK wannabes, and I've found about 5 of them, and I've been reading them all, and some of them are just obviously just made up. One of them had some pretty good stuff in, but nothing comparable to a quote from the old commentary. But Yeah, I like this phrase here. I am one. I, God, I am the form in which all forms are merged. I am the soul in which all souls are fused. I am the life, and in that life, all little lives remain. So that's pretty profound when you think about it. That from our viewpoint, where we are now, it's kind of hard to see that oneness. But when we return to the world of souls, we will see it much more clearly than we're able to in our separate state here, where we're governed by normal time and distance and space. And so the disciple has to kind of go inward to be able to get a grasp of what he's trying to say there. He says, when the lower mind adds divine understanding and synthetic apprehension of the will and purpose of God, then the three aspects of mind are unified. The three aspects of mind, he reminds us, are, he calls it the mind stuff or the chitta. That's a lower concrete mind. Then the second is the abstract mind, and then the intuition or the pure reasoning. And he says these three help to build the antikarana, which links the spiritual triad, the causal body, and the personality. In other words, the higher self and the lower self are linked. After this, a man enters into the consciousness of the monad, once this link happens, and the one. And then he finally understands oneness in a way he never understood it before. And when he enters into the consciousness of the monad, just like we have our physical body eventually dies, the body which the soul uses, called the causal body, actually dies when its job is done. And the causal body disintegrates, and then the illusion is ended and the person becomes one with his spiritual essence. He says after this, he can choose whether or not to incarnate or the type of body he will have. So once he passes what is called the fourth initiation, he's willing to let everything go and let his causal body go and establish a link directly with the spirit. Then the illusion is ended, and he can have a choice whether or not he wants to come back or not. He reminds us that energies that work through us, we have a number of energies working through us. Number one, the personality energy. Personality energies are your physical, emotional, and higher and lower mind. And in addition, he says we have planetary energies originating from the 7 planets emanating, 7 sacred planets that emanate the 7 rays. And we pick up these 7 rays that affect our personality and our interest. Then there's other influences from the earth itself. Then there's other influences from the moon. And most policemen will tell you that there is an influence from the moon because they see a lot of strange behavior during the full moon. And so just ordinary people have noticed there's an actual influence from the moon. And every phase of the moon has some type of influence on the astral body or the emotional body. The moon is very connected to the emotions. So the different energies that come from the moon will influence the emotional feelings of the masses. And then we have solar energies that emanate from our sun. So we have those energies, and then in addition we have cosmic energies coming from stars and different constellations and different invisible sources in the cosmos. So we have all kinds, he says, all kinds of influences out there. The strongest one is, of course, our the earth and our personalities itself and the things that's going directly through us. And people we come in contact with are also a tremendous influence. Okay, says, as we use these energies, we work through diva lives and influence them. The lowest types of divas or devas or builders on the evolutionary path are violet devas. Next come the green, and last of all, the white. So we have three different colors. The lowest evolution is the violet, and then the next are green, and then white. These are dominated by a fourth and special group, and they control the exoteric process of physical plane existence. Then there's lower forms of life. Now remember, the devas are kind of the angelic lives, but when you think of devas, you don't think of necessarily what we see in the Christian religion as angels, or some very highly evolved devas that have gone through the human kingdom already. And then there's other devas that haven't gone through the human kingdom. And then there's other devas that are almost like gods. So there's quite a few of them. I believe he said there's about 200 billion of them altogether associated with this earth. And their bodies are in etheric matter, so we are not able to see them normally. Now then, he says there's other lives that are sometimes called devas, but aren't really, but they're more elementaries. And they're sometimes called salamanders. And these are dense, gaseous lives, he says. And they create the basic fires that produce lives. And this is something that scientists don't really think of, that that which produces the heat in the center of the earth, the heat of the sun, chemical reactions that produce heat, these are all done with actual elementary lives called salamanders by DK. And they come in all kinds of different groupings. So he says the plane governing fire is the mental, and it's sometimes called the plane of fire. And it's governed by the Lord of Fire, who is called Agni. This is a name that's sometimes given to the solar logos. But the solar logos certainly a god of fire because he's a logos over the sun. But I think there's probably a number of entities that participate in that mental realm of what's called Agni. He says our planetary logos is focused in his mental body. He is, as has been said, is striving toward his fourth cosmic initiation. He carries us forward with him, and on a particular level, we achieve as cells within his body. So in other words, the fourth initiation is that initiation where you sacrifice everything that pertains to the world of form, everything that pertains to your desire to go on to something higher, and it's quite painful. And the fourth initiation that we know about was Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he underwent tremendous agony, where he was facing the crucifixion and also facing the dweller of the threshold. And he was in such agony, he says, Father, he says, if you can remove this cup from me, Father, remove it. But nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. And so he went through tremendous agony at that time until he was able to pass this fourth initiation and let everything go. One of the problems, things that made it so difficult for Jesus, the man, was that he had all this, it looked like he had all this opportunity with the powers that he had with the assistance from the Christ within to build the kingdom of God on the earth. And he was told, no, you're not going to do that. You're going to be crucified instead. And so, can you imagine having a tremendous opportunity? Let's suppose Joshua, you saw that you had an opportunity to establish peace on earth, goodwill to men, to make everybody lay down their arms and make the world a better place. You had all this opportunity, and then you had your higher self come to you and say, no, Joshua, you can't do that. You got to go let a bunch of these extremist terrorists tear your body apart instead.
I've had some experience with missed opportunities, but it's usually not because of the soul.
But that'd be kind of hard to take, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that'd be something, and it'd certainly be a role reversal. Usually the missed opportunities are because the form side doesn't line up.
Now, everybody in the Christian church thinks Jesus knew everything that was going to happen from the beginning, but I believe that he wasn't completely aware that he was going to have to be crucified till near the end. I think he began his mission thinking he was going to build the kingdom of God, and then he eventually got the message, no, you're not going to do that. And this is what created the great test for him, was that he had to give that up. And of course, the regular Christian idea is he just knew everything and right from the beginning. But I think he learned as he went along. The Gospels is pretty clear that near the end of his life, he pretty much sensed what was going to happen and what he had to do. So anyway, our planetary logos is going through what Jesus went through in the garden, so to speak. He had to come here, and now he's going through this fourth initiation. And he says this is why, because we're cells in his body, this is why there's so much pain and distress on the earth right now, is we're going through a period of tension because our planetary logos is going through a point of great tension himself, and that because we are part of his life, we're kind of sharing it with him. And so let's hope we can get him through this in the near future so we can have a lot more blissful existence. He says he says, as we move to the Aquarian age, we'll focus more on the plane of the intuition, and air will be a great symbol as we master all types of air type of power. Now, this was written in 1934, before there was as much flight as we did today, but we've certainly mastered the air and space to a much greater degree. Now, a great part of the fifth root race, which is the race we're in right now, doesn't matter what physical race we are, we're all in attempting higher consciousness, or part of this fifth root race. 3/5 of us, he says, stand close to the probationary path. And with the coming of the new age and the advent of Christ, in due time to his own place, he says, people will become more intuitive over the next 1,000 years. And eventually, he says 3/5 of the people is going to graduate from this planet. And then 2/5 or 40% will not, and they'll have to go to another round. They have to go to another Earth like this and kind of start fresh and attempt to repeat their class, so to speak, so that they too can graduate in the far future. Through rebirth, the disciple learns to dominate and use form correctly. The physical and the astral create the personality. Their union produces the consciousness or the I. This doesn't exist in subhuman or superhuman forms, though superhuman realize their individuality but focus on the group life. So we as humans are the only ones that have that I about us, that ego. The lower lives don't have it, and the higher lives don't have it. But the higher lives have a sense of it different than the lower lives. Animal and the plant lives don't have that sense of individuality. Whereas the higher lives have passed through the human and they have a knowledge of it, but they have how can I word it? Like the animals and the plants don't have a knowledge of it, aren't aware of what even an I is. But once they pass through, they're aware of what the I is, they're aware of their distinct place, but they have a consciousness of the whole, so to speak. So man is only one that's trapped in the ego, where we feel like the ego is all important. Okay, did somebody have a comment? I heard somebody say
Well, I said that we transcend this, the individuality, and realize we're part of the one.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Okay, that's kind of hard for people to realize, is that how we're like a cell in a body, a life that's higher than ourselves. And we're cells in the life, the planetary logos. And because of that, he shares somewhat in our distress and heights and lows and joys and sorrows, and we share in his, but we share in his more than he shares in ours as an individual. Just like if you have a group of cells in your body that are having a problem, it will produce a pain there, and you think, well, how can I alleviate that pain that I have right here in my chest or wherever? And so you start to pay attention to it. And so if there's a large group of us that are in a painful situation, the logos will we maybe attract his attention. If it's just one individual, not so much. Just like one cell in your body doesn't attract a lot of your attention, but you're still connected to that cell. But a group of cells that form like a whole organ. You have a problem with your liver, you will think, well, man, I better pay some attention to this and see what I can do to create a greater health here. So on the other hand, when the planetary logos itself is going through stress, it affects every cell in your body. Just like when you go through stress as an individual, you will actually affect every cell in your body to some degree. Each cell, if you're, let's say you went through a divorce, okay, you're feeling kind of depressed. You didn't want the divorce, but your one and only left you high and dry, and you're quite depressed. That will affect every cell in your body, but every cell in your body won't feel as depressed as you do. It will be suffer an influence, but it's still going to function just like normal and supply oxygen to your blood and all these things, but it will be affected. Now, the planetary logos is going through this tremendous initiation, and it's sending vibes, and we're affected, but we don't have to feel his full pain, so to speak. We're just affected by it. But that effect as a whole will pass over eventually, so we will, as a whole, when the initiation is over, the humanity will have a tremendous higher vibration about it that will produce a society that will be heaven on earth compared to what we have today. So that's what we can look forward to. Okay, any comments or questions before we wrap it up?
Well, I think that when we really look at our lives, we find that all the conditions of humanity in some way pass through our consciousness. We've had experiences of a little bit of all of this that humanity goes through.
Yeah. Yeah, and everything we go through prepares us for what is to come, that's for sure, too. Okay. Well, appreciate everybody showing up, and we will, I think everybody seems pretty happy with these 2 times we've kind of settled on